Ethan had moved there less than a week ago. It was a small, isolated town with barely 200 people living in it. After sunset, the roads emptied quickly, and by night, the entire place felt unnaturally quiet. There was only one road leading into town. On the left side was a long, open field. On the right stood a dense forest that looked dark even during the day. The road eventually led to a narrow concrete bridge built over a large lake. Past the bridge was the town. The lake was impossible to ignore. Even in daylight, the water looked too dark. It was Ethan's first week at the new job, and on his very first late shift, work dragged on much longer than expected. By the time he booked a cab and reached the road leading into town, it was already past 1 in the morning. The streets were empty. As the cab approached the bridge, Ethan looked toward the lake through the window. That's when he saw him, a man standing near the edge of the water. He was around 40 or 50 meters away, completely naked, staring into the lake. He wasn't moving at all. No shifting, no reaction, nothing. For a moment, Ethan leaned forward to get a better look, but the car kept moving. The driver didn't even glance toward the lake. Probably drunk, Ethan muttered quietly. Then he forgot about it. The next evening, Ethan left work earlier than usual. A co-worker dropped him near the road before the bridge. "Sorry, man, I'm already late," he said, before driving off. Ethan adjusted his bag and started walking toward the bridge. The sun was setting, and most of the road was already dark. As he reached the bridge, he looked toward the lake again. This time, the man wasn't alone. There were 5 people standing near the water, all of them naked, all of them facing the lake. They stood in a perfectly straight line with the exact same distance between each person. None of them moved. None of them spoke. They simply stood there, staring into the water. Ethan slowed down immediately. Something about the scene felt deeply wrong. Crossing the bridge suddenly didn't feel safe anymore. A large boulder sat near the roadside, and Ethan quietly moved behind it. From there, he could still see the people clearly without exposing himself. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the chanting began. The sound was low and rhythmic. The words didn't sound familiar, but the pattern stayed steady. Ethan felt a chill crawl through his body. "What the hell are they doing?" he whispered. Then suddenly, something touched his foot. Ethan looked down and froze. A large snake was sliding across his shoe. Its cold body slowly moved over his leg before disappearing into the rocks beside him. "Shit!" Ethan stumbled backward and accidentally stepped out from behind the boulder. The chanting stopped instantly. Every person near the lake turned toward him at the same time. Ethan's body locked up. None of them looked surprised. They just stared at him. Then one of them slowly raised an arm and pointed directly at Ethan. His throat tightened immediately. He pulled out his phone and tried unlocking it, but his hands were shaking too badly. When he looked back toward the lake, The people were gone. Then he heard footsteps coming from the other side of the bridge. Not normal footsteps. Sometimes slow, sometimes suddenly fast, sometimes distant before abruptly sounding close. They were coming toward him. Ethan tried putting his phone back into his pocket, but it slipped from his hand and hit the ground. He didn't stop to pick it up. He turned and ran straight into the forest. Branches scraped against his arms while rocks shifted beneath his feet. Behind him, the footsteps continued, but the movement didn't sound human. Sometimes it sounded like dragging, sometimes like rapid bursts through wet ground. At one point, Ethan was certain someone was directly behind him. Then suddenly, silence. The footsteps stopped completely, but Ethan kept running. After another minute, he spotted a tree large enough to climb and pulled himself up as fast as possible. Only then did he stop moving. He sat there breathing heavily while staring into the darkness below. The forest had gone completely silent, but Ethan knew they hadn't left. They were waiting. Hours passed slowly. The cold air made Ethan's body ache, but he never truly fell asleep. Every small sound from the forest kept pulling his attention back into the darkness below. He stayed there the entire night, barely moving, waiting for morning to come. By morning, the woods felt empty again. Ethan climbed down and slowly made his way back toward the road. His phone was gone, but after what happened the night before, he barely cared anymore. The moment Ethan got home, he locked the door behind him. He cleaned himself up, ate whatever food he had left, applied for leave from work, and collapsed onto his bed. When he finally woke up, it was already around 4 in the evening. For a few seconds, everything felt normal again. Then the memories came back. The people, the chanting, the pointing, the footsteps. A cold feeling spread through his chest. "I'm leaving tonight," he told himself. But the moment he stood up, something felt wrong. A sudden wave of weakness hit him hard enough to make him sit back down. His body felt heavy, almost drained. There wasn't a doctor nearby, and Ethan convinced himself he probably just needed rest. So he stayed home. Outside, darkness slowly covered the town again. Ethan woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. At first, he thought he imagined it. Then he heard it again. Sounds outside the house, not loud, just enough to feel like several people were standing near the door. Ethan slowly got out of bed, walked into the kitchen, and grabbed a knife from the counter. Then he stood beside the front door and listened carefully. The house felt completely silent otherwise. Then his eyes shifted toward the window beside him. Someone was standing outside. The figure stood motionless near the glass, barely visible in the darkness. Its posture immediately reminded Ethan of the people near the lake. The head leaned slightly forward. The shoulders hung too low. The arms rested loosely by its sides. And from outside, the chanting had returned. Quiet, steady, closer than before. Ethan slowly stepped backward, but his legs suddenly felt heavy again. Then pressure appeared against the door. Not banging, not trying to break it down, just several hands slowly pushing against it at once. The door creaked open. The same people walked inside. Up close, the way they moved looked even worse. Sometimes their bodies stayed upright, and sometimes They leaned too far forward while walking. Their movements looked unbalanced, almost unnatural. Ethan tried fighting them off, but his body barely responded. They grabbed him easily. Someone tied his wrists while the others dragged him toward the door. Outside, the chanting continued without stopping. They carried Ethan toward the lake using a makeshift stretcher built from wood and cloth. By the time they reached the bridge, most of his strength was gone. The lake waited ahead in complete darkness. When they finally reached the edge of the water, the chanting stopped. Everything became silent. Without saying a single word, they lifted Ethan one last time and threw him into the lake. The water swallowed him instantly. The lake remained calm for hours. Then, just after sunrise, the surface shifted slightly. A figure slowly emerged from the water. Ethan, completely naked. Something about him had changed. His head leaned slightly forward while he walked. His arms hung loosely by his sides, and his balance looked uneven. Without hesitation, he walked toward the others standing near the lake. Then he took his place among them, perfectly aligned with the rest of the line. Together, they stared into the water. That's when Ethan finally saw it. Just beneath the surface, something moved. Only a small part of it became visible. Two eyes, watching all of them from the darkness below. A car slowly crossed the bridge later that morning. The driver glanced toward the lake and immediately slowed down. Confusion spread across his face as he noticed a line of naked people standing near the shore. The car drifted slightly and clipped the side of the bridge. The driver quickly regained control and looked back again. And then, Ethan slowly raised his arm and pointed directly at him. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to subscribe. And if you ever find yourself driving through an empty town late at night, don't stop near the water.